In Kuji village, life moved like the slow river. Boys grew up to be farmers, fishermen, or carpenters, just like their fathers. The girls, after secondary school, would marry young and start families, cooking and caring for their children. The people of Kuji didn't know about university. It was like a dream they had never heard of. To them, education ended after secondary school, and that was enough. Parents were happy as long as their children could read and write. They didn't ask for more because they didn't know more. Life in the village was steady, like the sun rising and setting every day. This is how it had always been, how it was for years. But something was coming, something that would shake the quiet life of Kuje. A change was in the air, like a storm about to roll in. The village didn't know it yet, but life would never be the same again. One bright, sunny day, Kuje village buzzed with excitement. From far away, a group of city students came for an excursion. They arrived with big smiles, fancy clothes, and shiny shoes. The villagers had never seen anything like it. The students walked tall, holding their books in one hand and talking about life in the city. Their words sounded like music to the villagers' ears. "Look at how they walk," the villagers whispered. "Look at how they talk." The students showed them many strange and interesting things. They talked about the big machines they used in the city, machines that could build houses and make farming easier. They showed the villagers how they studied with the help of those machines. Everyone's eyes were wide with wonder. The chief, standing tall with his walking stick, couldn't believe it. He looked at the students and said to himself, "This is how our children should be." The whole village was thinking the same thing. For the first time ever, the idea of sending their own children to the city for university crossed their minds. The city students stayed for only a short time, but they left something behind: hope. The villagers now dreamed of a future where their children would go beyond the village, beyond secondary school, and reach for something greater. They wanted their children to wear fancy clothes, walk tall, and become wise, just like those city students. The villagers gathered under the big iroko tree to talk about this new dream of theirs. The men rubbed their chins, the women whispered to each other, and the children sat close, listening wide-eyed. They all agreed, one child must go to the city and learn the ways of the world. But who would it be? They looked around, thinking hard, and then someone spoke up, "Folake," and the others nodded, for everyone knew Folake was no ordinary girl. Her beauty was like the sun shining after rain, bright and pure. She was clever too, with quick eyes that noticed everything. She was kind, always helping her mother, always laughing, always making the elders smile. "Yes, Folake," they said, their voices growing stronger. "She will be the one to make Kuje proud." So, the villagers gathered their gifts for Folake's journey. The women packed food, dried yams, ground pepper, a little palm oil. The men pooled what little money they had, every kobo they could spare. And, like a river flowing with love, they showered her with blessings. The old women placed their hands on her head, whispering words of strength and protection, filling her heart with courage. "Go, Folake," they said. "Remember us. Make us proud." And with a heart full of hopes and dreams from the whole village, Folake left Kuje, her small bag clutched tightly, her mind buzzing with thoughts of the city. As she walked away, the villagers watched, waving and wiping tears from their eyes, sending her off with all their dreams riding on her small shoulders. When Folake stepped into the city, it was as if she had entered a whole new world. Buildings stood tall like giant trees, cars whizzed by like birds, and the streets were full of people. each with their own path and purpose. Folake's eyes were wide with wonder and her heart beat with both excitement and fear. School was a strange place at first, but Folake was quick to learn. She studied hard, always raising her hand, always listening carefully. Soon her teachers noticed her bright mind, and her classmates saw her kind smile. She wasn't just a girl from a faraway village, she became their friend. Folake met a girl named Toshi, who became her best friend. Toshi knew every corner of the city and showed Folake the way around. She taught her which paths to take, which foods to eat, and even how to avoid the city's many dangers. With Toshi by her side, Folake felt a little more at ease. But life in the city was not easy. The money Folake's village sent was little, just enough to buy a few things. Some days she would go to bed with a rumbling stomach, her mind drifting back to Kuje, where her family and the village had given all they could to support her. "I must not fail them," she whispered to herself each night, holding on to the small hope they had placed in her heart. And so, Folake carried on, balancing the city's challenges with her village's dreams, her spirit as strong as a young tree, swaying but unbroken. At first, Folake thought her new school was filled with kind faces like her friend Toshi, but soon she learned that not all faces wore smiles. Some students, especially those with polished shoes and fancy clothes, began to notice that Folake dressed differently. She wore her simple Ankara dresses, each stitch a reminder of her village, her family, her people. To her, they were clothes of pride, but to them, they were strange and out of place. They began to whisper as she walked past, their voices sharp as thorns. "Look at her," they'd murmur. "She's just a village girl." Some of the girls laughed behind her, covering their mouths with their manicured hands. "Doesn't she know how to dress in the city?" Each word stung like a bee's sting, small but piercing. Folake tried to hold her head high, to ignore their laughter and hurtful words. She would walk quickly, hoping the day would end soon, hoping that tomorrow would be better. But each day, the whispers grew louder and the laughter turned into taunts. They began calling her village girl, as if it were her name, each word echoing in her mind. Some of the boys teased her too, nudging each other and smirking as they saw her in her simple clothes. They'd block her path, their eyes cold. "Go back to where you came from," they sneered. "You don't belong here." Folake's heart grew heavy, and the loneliness wrapped around her like a shadow that wouldn't leave. But Folake was no stranger to hardship. She clenched her fists, reminding herself of the village that had trusted her, the people who had sent her with nothing but hope. Still, the burden grew heavier each day, and Folake began to wonder if the city would break her spirit. The once bright light in her eyes dimmed, as if the city's shadows were swallowing her whole. As time passed, Folake couldn't help but notice something odd about her friend Toshi. Though Toshi's family didn't have much, she always seemed to have money, new shoes, snacks, and the latest dresses. Folake, who counted every coin and struggled to buy the smallest things, found herself wondering. One afternoon, Folake looked at Toshi, her curiosity finally spilling over. "Toshi," she asked, her voice gentle, "how do you manage to buy all these things? Where do you get the money?" Toshi only laughed, a quick, light sound, brushing the question away with a wave of her hand. "Ah, Folake, don't worry about it," she said, smiling. "Just a little hustle here and there." But Folake's mind couldn't rest. She would watch Toshi as she disappeared in the evenings, dressed up with a little more care, her eyes bright and secretive. And every time, Folake's curiosity grew sharper, like the edge of a knife. Folake tried asking Toshi again, but her friend just laughed it off once more, saying, "One day you'll understand, Folake." And with that, she changed the subject, leaving Folake's questions unanswered. Yet the mystery of Toshi's hustle hung in Folake's mind like a shadow, making her wonder what life in the city might demand from her next. Days turned into weeks, and every now and then, Folake would ask again, hoping her friend might reveal the secret. But each time, Toshi would laugh, shrugging it off as if it were a mystery meant to stay hidden. "Just enjoy, Folake," she'd say. "Don't worry about how I get my money." But Folake couldn't ignore the thought nagging in the back of her mind. There was a shadow, a hint of something unknown, and it began to grow, spreading like a dark cloud. What was Toshi hiding? And how was she managing to live so comfortably while Folake struggled, alone in the quiet moments, to make sense of it all? The question followed Folake like an echo, a secret half-spoken, lingering in the silence. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something she couldn't yet see, something hidden deep in the heart of the city. Time slipped by like sand through her fingers, and Folake's small stash of money soon ran dry. The city's demands were endless, and each day Folake's hunger gnawed at her, a sharp reminder that the little her village sent was never enough. Her stomach would growl like a restless animal, the ache growing louder as her hope began to fade. She would sit alone in her small room at night, a simple candle lighting her letters. "Mama, Papa," she wrote with trembling hands, "things are hard here. I don't want to be a burden, but it's so different in the city." She sent the letters with the hopes that her words would bring a bit more help. But Kuja was a poor village. They sent what they could, little parcels with dried fish or a few coins. Her mother's letters were filled with love and worry. But Folake knew her family was stretching themselves thin just to support her. Days turned into long, hungry weeks. She could barely focus in class, her mind drifting like smoke, too weak to keep her thoughts steady. Her stomach growled during lessons, each sound loud as a thunderclap, but she tried to sit still, ignoring the laughter from her classmates. Folake knew she couldn't let the village down, but her spirit was breaking, slowly, piece by piece. Nights grew colder, the city darker, and the weight of her hardship pressed upon her like an invisible stone, heavy and unrelenting. And in the midst of it all, Toshi's laughter echoed in her mind, the friend with easy money, a hidden secret, and no worries. Folake's heart twisted, caught between pride and the bitter taste of helplessness. One night, as Folake lay on her thin mattress, her stomach empty and aching, she reached a breaking point. She could no longer ignore the hunger clawing at her, a constant reminder of how hard life in the city had become. The next morning, with weary eyes and a heart heavy with shame, she found Toshi outside the school. "Toshi, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I need to know. Let me work with you, whatever it is. I can't keep living like this." Toshi looked at her friend with a serious gaze, her smile fading as she realized how desperate Folake had become. "Folake," she began slowly, "are you sure? This isn't like other work. It's different." But Folake's eyes were resolute, her need too great to turn back now. "I don't care," she said firmly. her voice steadier than she felt. Just show me. I have no choice. After a long, silent pause, Toshi finally nodded. She led Folake to a quiet corner where the city lights cast faint shadows. Listen, Folake, this isn't something you share with anyone. It's a way to make money quickly, but it's not what you'd expect. And there, in hushed tones, Toshi revealed the truth. Folake's heart skipped, her pulse quickening as she understood what her friend was saying. This wasn't the type of work she had imagined. It was something that felt foreign, dangerous, something the villagers would never approve of. But Folake, worn down by hunger and hardship, nodded without a word. I'll do it, she whispered, her voice quiet but determined. For the first time in months, she felt a sliver of relief, though it was shadowed by a growing darkness in her heart. Her path was changing, and she could feel it. But there was no turning back now. That night, Toshi brought Folake a dress that shimmered like the stars, one that made her look almost like she belonged to the city itself. Toshi painted her face with colors Folake had never worn before, and when she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized the girl staring back. You look perfect, Toshi said with a nod, her smile reassuring but distant. Folake followed her friend to a bar where the lights were bright and music pounded like a heartbeat. The air was thick with laughter and chatter, strangers drifting from table to table. Toshi guided her through it all, showing her how to talk, how to laugh, how to charm, and Folake, nervous but determined, followed every step, every whisper from Toshi's guiding words. As the night wore on, Folake found herself sitting with a man who handed her money, more than she had ever held in her life. She had had fun with the man earlier, satisfying him in the room. The coin slipped into her palm like a gift from another world, the weight of them filling her with a strange, new feeling. She had come here with hunger in her heart, but now she felt something else, something close to excitement. When she left the bar that night, her pockets full, the city lights seemed brighter, her worries farther away. She spent freely, buying food and treats she had only dreamed of tasting. For a moment, she forgot everything, her village, her promises, the hope she had carried. All she knew was the thrill of her newfound life, a taste of freedom that felt as sweet as honey. Folake had stepped into a world that was dazzling and dangerous, a world that made her feel alive. She didn't know it then, but with each step she took, she was leaving behind the girl from Kuje village, the one they had sent with so much hope. One early morning, Folake returned from the lavish home of a wealthy man she had been with the night before. Her body felt heavy, a deep ache settling into her bones, and her skin felt as though it were burning. She brushed it off as a mild sickness, just the exhaustion of late nights, she thought, and perhaps a touch of fever. She slipped into bed, hoping rest would ease the strange weakness that clung to her like a shadow. But when Folake awoke, the weakness was still there. Days passed, and she grew more tired with each one, her body feeling as if it was slipping away from her control. Her friends noticed too, and their laughter turned to concern. They brought her food, medicine, anything they thought might help, but her strength continued to fade like water slipping through her fingers. Then, something even stranger began to happen. Her belly started to swell. At first, she thought it was only her eyes playing tricks, but it grew rounder each day, hardening like a clay pot. Her arms and legs, however, grew thin, frail as twigs. The other girls whispered, their faces pale with fear. It's like kwashoko, one of them murmured, shaking her head. But how? She eats more now than ever. Folake herself was frightened. She touched her swollen belly, pressing gently, as if trying to understand this strange change. She felt her bones poking through her skin elsewhere, her cheeks hollowing out, her eyes growing large and distant. And yet, her belly kept growing, as if it held something far darker than hunger. Her friends did all they could. They brought herbs, specialties, and medicines they'd heard would cure almost anything. They watched over her, hoping each morning to see her sit up with a smile. Her strength returned. But no matter what they tried, Folake only grew weaker. Her skin lost its glow, her hair turned dull, and her once bright eyes now looked tired, heavy, with a shadow that no amount of rest could lift. Days turned into weeks, and soon her friends had exhausted every remedy they knew. The city doctors shook their heads, saying, "There's nothing we can do." And slowly, even her friends started to drift away, frightened by what they did not understand. Folake lay alone, feeling her life slip further and further from her, like a river flowing beyond her reach. Desperate and terrified, they made a choice. "We must take her back to the village," they whispered among themselves, nodding with determination. They would return her to Kuje, the village that had once filled her heart with strength and hope. It was the only place left that might save her, the only place where a solution could be found. And so, with heavy hearts, they lifted Folake's frail, shrunken body, covering her with a blanket, and set off for Kuje, hoping her people would understand. Folake's friends arrived in Kuje on a grey, misty morning, carrying her as gently as one would carry a fragile doll. The villagers, who had eagerly awaited her return, gathered around, their faces filled with anticipation. For months, they had dreamed of this day, imagining Folake returning as a grand symbol of the village's pride, a young woman transformed by the city, perhaps even wearing clothes that shone like the city lights. But what they saw left them silent, their hopes dropping like stones. Folake was hardly recognizable. Her once beautiful face was pale and hollow, her body frail and thin, as if she hadn't eaten in weeks. Her belly was swollen and round, like a twisted mockery of health, and her eyes held a dull, distant stare that seemed lost in some invisible storm. The once vibrant girl, who had left with the village's hopes, now looked like a ghost returned from some dark place. Folake's friends, avoiding the villagers' questioning eyes, quickly explained that Folake had become sick, that city life had taken its toll, and that they did not know what else to do but bring her home. They offered no further details, not even the life they'd introduced her to. Each word heavy and clipped, and without another glance, they turned and left, hurrying back to the world they knew, leaving Kuje and Folake's fate behind them. The villagers looked on in shock and sorrow, murmuring among themselves, confusion and sadness blending in their voices. This is not our Folake," someone whispered, hardly able to believe the sight. Her parents stepped forward, trembling, and knelt beside her frail figure, tears welling in their eyes. They had sent a young, strong girl with dreams as wide as the sky, and now before them lay a shadow of that same child, broken, weak, and silent. And so the village gathered around her in silence, each person grappling with their disbelief and sorrow. Folake lay on a woven mat in the village square, surrounded by familiar faces, each one heavy with concern. Her frail body shivered as she looked around, seeing the warmth and sadness in the eyes of the people who had sent her to the city with so much hope. With trembling lips, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper, but carrying the weight of 1,000 regrets. Life in the city was hard, she began, her eyes fixed on the ground. The money you sent, it was never enough. I tried to manage, but hunger became my constant shadow. Her voice cracked as she continued, each word cutting her like a knife. I met a friend, Toshi, who showed me a way to survive, but it was a path I never should have taken. I forgot my purpose. I forgot you, the ones who believed in me. I chose the wrong path. As her confession filled the air, the villagers listened, their faces a mix of sorrow and understanding. Tears slipped down her cheeks, each one glistening like fallen hopes. I have disgraced you all, she whispered, and brought shame to my family, to our village. The elders stepped forward, their faces stern, but their eyes soft with the wisdom of years. The oldest among them, Elder Nna, placed a gentle hand on Folake's head. His voice was deep and steady as he spoke. What you suffer now is not just illness, Folake. This is no kwashiorkor, no simple sickness. You are with child, conceived outside of marriage. This is the curse of our village's tradition, a punishment for breaking the sacred bond. The villagers murmured softly, nodding in understanding. Folake's swollen belly, her weakening body, it was all part of the ancient consequence, one known to every girl and boy raised in Kuje. The tradition was clear. If a young woman got disvirgined or got pregnant outside of wedlock, which Folake is now a victim of after sleeping with men in the city, her body would suffer, her spirit would weaken as a reminder of the village's honor and values. But, Elder Nna continued, his voice steady and calm, there is a cure, Folake. The village has seen such sorrow before, and we know the ways of healing. The path back to health will not be easy, but if you're willing, you can be whole again. Folake looked up at the elders, her eyes brimming with both hope and shame. She nodded, grateful for the chance to make amends, for the understanding in their eyes. The villagers gathered around her, their hearts softened with compassion, ready to help her find her way back. The village herbalists gathered around Folake, whispering prayers as they prepared herbs and potions. Their hands moved gently, with the care one would give a delicate flower. Each day, they applied roots and leaves soaked in special oils, massaging her swollen belly, whispering words of healing to guide her spirit back to strength. Folake lay still, trusting them, feeling warmth return to her bones like sunlight after a long storm. Slowly, Folake's strength returned, her frail body filling out, her eyes gaining back the light they once held. She began to care for herself, eating the nourishing meals her mother prepared and listening to the advice of the elder women on how to tend to the growing life within her. They taught her how to cradle her belly with love and respect, how to speak softly to her unborn child, to make peace with the path that had brought her back home. Months passed, and the day finally came. Under the moonlit night, Folake gave birth to a baby boy, his cries filling the air like a song of new beginnings. The villagers gathered, offering blessings and prayers for the child's future. Folake held him close, his small face a reminder of all she had endured and the promise of all she would become. She named him Ayodele, meaning joy has come home. for he was not only her son, but also her redemption. As the seasons changed, Folake grew determined to finish what she had once set out to do. With her son in her arms, she vowed to return to school, this time with a renewed spirit and a heart full of purpose. Her days were long, balancing studies with motherhood. But she did not waver. She worked tirelessly, each small victory a step toward the life her village had dreamed for her. Years passed, and Folake's hard work bore fruit. She became a respected woman, known not only for her intelligence, but for her strength and resilience. When she finally returned to Kuji, not as a lost soul, but as a woman who had overcome her trials, the village celebrated. They honored her courage and the strength she showed in the face of hardship, seeing her not as a girl who had strayed, but as a woman who had learned and grown. Folake's story became a tale passed down from one generation to the next, a reminder of the importance of courage, resilience, and second chances. The village, once quiet and simple, now carried her story like a precious gem, a lesson to all young ones who would one day follow their own paths. And as the years went by, the people of Kuje spoke her name with pride, for Folake had become the symbol of their hopes and dreams, a beacon of the strength that lived in every heart. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, comment what you learned from the tale, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting tales just like this one. Thank you.